All right, we didn't mess it up that time, Carrie. All right, good morning and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, AI and Collaboration, Unlocking ChatGPT's Potential for HR, co-hosted by the Manitoba Trucking Association and Supply Chain Manitoba. My name is Jessica, and I'm the Sector Council Program Manager with MTA, and I'm joined by Carrie Chan, Marketing and Communications Manager with Supply Chain Manitoba. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Supply Chain Manitoba and Manitoba Trucking are located in Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Ininu, Dakota peoples, and on the homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge the work that we do does take us through the ancestral lands of many nations. I'm going to turn it over to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We are pleased to welcome our guest speaker, Misty Fraser. She is a career consultant and people first HR service, and she will share her expertise on leveraging ChatGPT to boost productivity, save your time, and enhance the candidate experience. So with 20 plus year of HR leadership and career consulting experience, Misty brings invaluable insight on AI's role in transforming HR practices.
And just a reminder, the session is being recorded, as you heard me at the top, and it's going to be published with MTA and the supply chain website. So during the session, you can use the chat function or the Q&A function, which should be the little icons below, to ask questions. We're going to hold those till the end, and then when Misty's done, we're going to present those questions to her. And so right now, I'm happy to turn it over to Misty.
Thank you very much, ladies. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join today's webinar. I know as HR professionals, you are all incredibly busy, and I appreciate you being here with me today. Before we dive into our topic, I did want to just take a brief moment to share just a little bit of an overview of what we do at People First. So here at People First, we provide comprehensive people-focused support through the entire life cycle of the employee. So everything from strategic hiring and HR consulting to ongoing HR advisory services and my department, career management, we help organizations like yours build, develop, and support their workforce at every stage. Now, up until recently, I spent most of my career in human resources, where, like many of you, I have been involved in hiring hundreds of team members. And unfortunately, I've also been involved in many, many terminations. In my current role as a career consultant, again, I partner with organizations like yours who have made the difficult decision to part ways with employees. And so my role as a career consultant is to support and guide these individuals through what is really a difficult journey of job loss. And so having been involved in job transition on both the employer and employee side of the table, I think it does give me a unique perspective on how to support our clients. Now, you may be wondering, what does this have to do with our topic today, and how does this help me as an HR professional? Well, over the past 2 years, my team and I have been spending time researching and leveraging AI tools like ChatGPT to really help our clients through their journey. And so what I would like to do today with you is I would like to share and do some reverse engineering, where I will share some strategies that we use ChatGPT for in helping our clients, but flip it to the HR side of the table. So these are strategies that perhaps you will be able to use in the work that you do. So hopefully on that note, I have piqued your curiosity a little bit. And now let's jump into what our agenda looks like. So here's what we will cover during our time together. So first, I would like to touch actually on some different AI tools that you may not be familiar with that are similar to ChatGPT, as they will have different pros and cons, and there may be some that work better than others. Next, I want to touch on just a few of the ethical considerations and best practices that are important to keep in mind when you're using AI tools. And then we'll get into some very specific case uses that pertain to recruitment processes and how you can use ChatGPT in that respect. And then finally, that should leave us with a little bit of time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. So hopefully that sounds good to everybody. So on that note, I want to start by saying, and I don't think anybody will disagree with this comment, that it is clear that AI is significantly transforming how we do work. And that would be no exception in the space of HR. So in today's webinar, we will focus specifically on how AI tools are streamlining the recruitment process. So everything from writing your internal job descriptions and external job postings to minimizing hiring biases to interview prep. And while I'm going to refer specifically to ChatGPT later in the presentation, I did want to take this opportunity to make mention some of the tools that are very similar to ChatGPT that you might also find value in doing your HR work. And by the way, all of these have free versions. That said, I do just want to make the comment that by sharing these AI tools with you, they're not an endorsement, and I'm certainly not recommending one or any. My goal is really just to let you know some of the tools that are available, some of the potential applications, and then I leave it to you as HR professionals to do your due diligence and make sure that you check these tools out carefully to determine whether or not they are appropriate for your organization. Okay, so let's start with ChatGPT because that really is the focus of today's webinar. I will tell you that in my opinion, I think ChatGPT really does shine in its ability to generate HR-related content. So everything from creating HR documents to communications, and of course, in our topic today, in respect to recruitment. So as I mentioned, I think its strengths will lie in areas such as writing those job descriptions and job postings and really helping you attract top talent. You can use it to generate personalized candidate outreach messages, whether that's on LinkedIn or via email. And it can be great for your interview preparation. Everything from your interview questions to even having it create rubrics for you. And rubrics is just a fancy word to say your standardized scoring guides. So if you score your interviews and you need a guide to do that in a fair, unbiased manner, then ChatGPT can help you do that. Okay, moving on, there is Microsoft Copilot. And I think the power of Microsoft Copilot is really its integration within Microsoft 365. So that integration makes it exceptionally strong for a lot of those really document-heavy HR-related tasks because of its ability to work within the existing Microsoft workflows. So I think it excels at things like drafting HR policies and handbooks and compliance documents, obviously within Word. It can really streamline the creation of PowerPoint presentations, and it can even be great for things like Excel reports and data summaries. And it can even be integrated right within Outlook. So it can help with things like automating your email follow-ups, your meeting reminders, and any of the communications that you need to send out. Next, I'll mention Anthropic's Claude. And what I think is really interesting about Claude is that it was designed very specifically to provide context-aware and unbiased content, which I think makes it really suitable for things like fair hiring practices. And so while many of the AI tools that I'm speaking about in this slide do incorporate measures to reduce discrimination and bias, Claude was actually built with that as a core principle from the very outset. So it could be great with things like writing DEI conscious job descriptions to really attract a diverse talent pool. It's great for generating unbiased interview scripts, right, in that structured assessment area. And it can even help analyze candidate responses to really help identify who's going to fit well within your culture. So some interesting things you can do with that tool. The next tool on the slide is Google's Gemini. So Gemini's strength is really in data analysis. It's great for document generation and a lot of those collaborative tasks that you need to do. And it really thrives within the Google ecosystem. So it's kind of like Copilot. It's been built for the Google ecosystem. So some of its key strengths would be things like scanning and analyzing lots of resumes at volume. It would be great for automating maybe interview scheduling within the Google Calendar. And it can even help with things like generating predictive hiring insights based on past candidate performance. So again, some interesting applications. Next, we have Perplexity. And what I really think is great about Perplexity and what I think it's really ideal for is providing you with real-time data and research purposes. So any type of research that you need to do, I think Perplexity is a tool that you should check out. And that's including anything related to HR. So for example, you could use it around, making sure you're up to date on legislation and regulation for compliance purposes. You could use it for researching talent market trends, such as in-demand skills. So again, it's up to date and it's great for research. And what's really unique is that when you do any type of prompt, when it provides you its output, it will tell you, it'll give you the links to where it's pulled that information from. So that allows you then to go and validate that the source it's using makes sense and is applicable. Now, you may or may not have heard of DeepSeek. This is really one of the brand new AI tools on the scene. It's probably launched in the last month or so. So it is still in early stages of development, but I'm already reading articles that it's showing a lot of promise. I think what appeals to many people is that the free version of DeepSeek has a limit of 50 prompt messages at one time. Whereas if you compare that to the free version of ChatGPT, you only get about 9 or 10 messages within a 5-hour window. So obviously DeepSeek is going to allow you to do a lot more work and spend more time, within the tool. That said, I've also been reading some concerns around data security, and I am going to talk a little bit about that in a future slide. So I do think it's really important that you review their privacy policy. You should do that for all of these AI tools, but in particular with DeepSeek. And then lastly on the screen, I've mentioned the tool POE, which stands for Platform for Open Exploration. And what's really unique about POE is that all of these AI tools that I've just mentioned and a ton more can all be located within POE. So POE acts as a centralized hub for all of these AI tools. It's kind of a one-stop shop. So let's say you wanted to use multiple tools in a given day for maybe a particular project you were working on. Rather than having to maybe, go from tab to tab, you could actually go to POE and you would find them all listed there. Again, with a lot other tools as well. So just a small handful of what's out there that you may or may not be familiar with. I'm a big believer it's important that you test out the different options, keeping in mind, of course, the type of work that you are doing within the tool to determine really what's going to work best for you. And again, they all have their pros and cons. They all have their limitations. Ultimately, you have to do your due diligence to really understand the tool and whether or not it's going to work for you and your organization. Okay, so before we jump into ethical considerations, I did have a quick poll that I'm hoping you'll participate in. So if you wouldn't mind scanning the QR code, I'm curious to know, of all the tools that I just mentioned, which ones are you currently using within your organization? And it can be, one, many, or none, but just want to get a sense out there of what you might be using. So I'll just give a minute for you guys to submit your responses. Not surprising, ChatGPT and Copilot being the top two most popular. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we've got some Copilot and ChatGPT users. So maybe you'll go and check out some of these other tools that I mentioned and explore perhaps what value they might be able to add to the work that you're doing. All right. Let's now briefly talk about some ethical considerations when using AI tools. And I'm sure in the upcoming webinar, your speaker will speak to all of the different considerations. This is just a small handful that I wanted to touch on. So let's start with one of the biggest ones, and that is the potential bias that you can find within these AI algorithms. So, a lot of these AI tools can perpetuate or amplify existing biases if they are trained on biased data. And so, from that perspective, if you're using this tool and it does have biased data, then that can obviously pose a problem, especially when you think about, making decisions based on employee or, in the recruitment case, candidates based on protected characteristics. So while most of these tools absolutely do strive to mitigate bias, it still might occur. And so as HR professionals, it's really important that you are regularly auditing these types of tools for fairness and to make sure that the training data is diverse and representative, of all of the groups. So you might be asking yourself, well, how do we do this? Well, the first thing you can do is with all of these AI vendors is you can request documentation from them and ask them and see documentation on exactly what they do to mitigate bias. So that's the first thing you could do. I think the most simple thing, though, that you can do, and the most important thing, is to make sure that when you're using these tools, A, it's to be aware of potential bias, and B, to never use these tools in isolation, to vet and validate them with other potential tools, but most importantly, to make sure that you never lose the human oversight aspect. That's going to be the biggest preventer of potential bias. So something for you to keep in mind. Next, I want to touch on data privacy and security. So all of these tools process huge amounts of personal data, which does raise concerns around privacy and data protection. And this is particularly true if you are uploading maybe sensitive company documents, employee and candidate information. I can tell you that you do have the ability in almost all of these tools to opt out of them using the information that you put into the prompt for training purposes. So you should look to opt out, with all of these tools if you're using them. I can tell you Claude actually does not train on user data by default, but ChatGPT, for example, I know that you can go into your security settings and you can opt out. So whatever tools you're using, just explore the option to opt out. Now, that's what's really interesting right now about DeepSeek, and that is it does not actually offer the option to opt out. So this is why it's raised a lot of concerns that I mentioned previously. So for example, organizations like NASA and the US Navy, they are not using DeepSeek and they're not permitting anyone who works for the organization to use this particular tool because of the fact that you can't opt out. So again, I highly recommend consider opting out. You may have to actually reach out to the vendor and make that request via email if it's not an option within the security setting. All right. Next is around accountability and human oversight. So there is a big risk. If you are relying on these tools to make decisions, there is the risk that there may be errors or there may be biases that go unchecked. So as HR professionals, it's important, and I think you would all know that these tools are amazing. There is no doubt that they can help with efficiency, they can help you streamline processes, and they can even assist you with making decisions. However, they should never replace you making the final decision. They should never again replace that human oversight or accountability. Moving on, I'll just talk briefly around legal compliance. Again, in the world of HR, this is a really important consideration. All of the AI tools you're using, they need to comply with the various employment legislation, anti-discriminatory laws, all of the kind of the rules, if you will, in the work that you do. That all has to be a part of these AI tools. So again, how do you make sure that that's the case? Well, similar to opting out with your data being used, you can reach out directly to the vendor and you can ask them, what are they doing or how do they ensure that they are compliant with all of the various laws and regulations that are necessary? And again, you ultimately want to make sure that your expertise, your experience, and your education is something that you are relying on as well when making those decisions. So if something doesn't seem right, then there's a good chance it's not. Use other sources to validate your thinking. And then finally, I wanted to talk about job displacement and reskilling. So, you know, with these AI tools becoming more and more popular, being used more and more in our everyday work, there is concerns about job displacement. And you've probably heard, like I have many, many times, the saying that, you know, AI will not replace you, but someone using it better will replace you. And while I still think there's merit to that, and that is absolutely true, I also believe that a lot of our roles in you know, various functions within our organizations, they're likely to get more efficient with AI tools. And so that means we have to think about, you know, how are we filling the work that the employee now needs to be able to do, both in using these tools, but in also doing other things to make that a full-time job. And I think HR professionals play a really important part in helping their companies navigate this important discussion. You know, I think you guys need to be thinking about, you know, what are the roles that are likely to be impacted by AI? How do we prioritize skilling or upskilling so that those employees that are impacted by AI, you know, still have either new jobs to go into or know how to use the tools to do their current job better? And finally, I think it's up to HR professionals to make sure that we're creating a culture of learning that includes AI tools, that we're trying to reduce the fear associated by some of our employees about the value that they can bring. Because ultimately, if we use these tools to streamline kind of that, call it mundane or routine work, that really frees up your time to do the really value add type work, really to focus in on the more strategic side of the work that you do and your employees. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to some of the best practices, and I'll move through this fairly quickly. So data privacy, this is just, you know, this is just a reiteration to what we just talked about previously. Be mindful of what you're putting into those AI tools, especially if you have not opted out. In working with clients, you know, our clients know that we use AI tools, so we're very transparent about that. When we are working with our clients, for example, if we're using ChatGPT to help them customize their resume, you know, we never put their personal information into the prompt. We always exclude their name, their email, their phone number. So again, really think about the information that you're including because it might be used for other purposes. Next is collaborate, not replace. And for me, this is probably one of the strongest messages that I try to promote and that I certainly try to educate my clients on. And that is that, we really should be collaborating with these tools. But again, we should never allow them to replace our human judgment. And another big thing that I talk to clients about, and I think it applies, on your side of the table, is that these AI tools, they do produce amazing documents. However, they read and they speak very much in their AI language, if you will. Like, it's very easy to tell when a document has been fully produced by ChatGPT. There are tells there. And so one of the things you want to make sure you don't lose is your organization or your own personal voice. You want whatever you're producing to still talk in the language that your organization uses or that you use, so that it remains authentic as opposed to feeling too much like it's been AI generated. Okay. Data limitations. So, tools are definitely getting better at being up to date, but that doesn't mean they always are. So you really want to make sure that you're verifying with other sources, especially where accuracy is important. Be kind. Okay, so this is really interesting. So I've done some research, and there was some Google engineers who actually set out to find what were the most optimized prompts that they could use in what was called back then Google's PaLM model, which again was similar to ChatGPT in the very kind of early stages of when all of this was taking place. And very specifically, they were wanting to compare when they used supportive phrases like take a deep breath, or when they just use kind of straightforward language, what was going to produce better results. And so they applied it specifically to some really complicated AI mathematical questions. And what they found is when they told the tool to take a deep breath, the tool actually had an astonishing 80% accuracy rate, compared to only 34% accuracy when they didn't use that kind of supportive language. So what does that mean? Well, it certainly doesn't mean that AI has feelings. I'm not suggesting that. But what it does tell us is that, by using some of the supportive language that you would actually tell a human being to do, it actually can then comb through this vast amount of data much more effectively and find better results. And so I always joke, I always do use my please and thank yous when I'm prompting ChatGPT, because I always figure if we're going to go Terminator here, I'm going to be on the right side of the line, and I'm going to make sure that I've been respectful and kind when I've talked to my tools. So anyway, just some fun facts I thought I would share. Hallucinations and accuracy. So this is really interesting, and it can be quite problematic. So it's important to note that all AI tools, they are designed to give you a response. So even if they don't know the answer to something, they will create a response for you. And oftentimes those responses will appear to be very plausible. So you really want to make sure that you do fact check when it's really critically important. And I'll give you a really good example of something that happened. There was a lawyer back in 2023 that actually used ChatGPT to help them create, it was a legal briefing. And it turns out that ChatGPT actually created 6 fictitious, non-existent case citations. And that lawyer did not fact check, and he presented that legal briefing, and it was soon discovered by the judge that these, in fact, were not real case laws. And as a result, he was fined over $5,000. So, it can be easy to be fooled, because like I said, they're designed to provide what's really appears to be a plausible response. And I have seen it in the work that I do where it has actually made stuff up. So I actually use prompts where I'll say, do not make anything up. to remind it that it can't take those liberties. So small tip that you might want to include in your prompting. And then finally, prompt engineering. So you might be hearing this kind of language, but the quality of the prompt will determine the quality of the output. So it's that whole notion, garbage in, garbage out. So, I've heard people say, with AI tools, we're no longer going to have to think for ourselves. And I actually disagree with that completely. I think the way we now think when we're using tools is very different. And I think it's really going to start to draw on our critical thinking, because you want this tool to provide you the best outcome, the best information. And so that means you really need to take the time up front to really think about what you need to feed it, what you need it to do in order for it to really produce a great result. So it might make quick work in doing what it is we're asking them to do, but we need to take some time to really think about it first in order to get it to that place. All right. So that is enough of kind of some of the background that I want you to think about. Let's now jump into how you can use it specifically for the purpose of recruitment. So here are just a few quick stats on the board that I think might paint a bit of a picture on how this can be beneficial. So first of all, 79% of organizations are either using or planning to implement AI in their HR processes. And so this was a study done in 2023 by Deloitte. Another bit of research shows that companies that effectively use AI recruitment use AI in recruitment processes, they report a time to hire reduction by 40%. Now, as much as AI can perpetuate biases, when used correctly, it can actually reduce bias by 25%. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because I think that's a really interesting place to explore. And then 67% of hiring decision makers believe that the main advantage of AI in recruitment specifically is really around its time-saving capabilities. And what's great about that is that you can then use that time for more strategic tasks like building relationships with your candidates. So just some food for thought. All right, so here's that reverse engineering that I was talking a little bit about at the very start. So when I'm working with a client, one of the very first things we do is we analyze your job posting. And we build a resume and a cover letter off of what's in that job posting. So job postings are incredibly important. So how can you use ChatGPT to make sure that you have an incredible, engaging, candidate-focused job posting? Well, you can do it by first using it to assist you with creating your internal job description. And then you can have it highlight very specific aspects of that internal job description that you think is really important for the candidate to be aware of. And you can use very specific prompting to help you also differentiate that job posting from all of your competition. You can have it focus in on your culture. You could have it focus in on the impact that role will have within the organization. So there's lots of things you can do to make that job posting more attractive to your candidates. And I think that ChatGPT can do a really good job of that. And I'll share a prompt shortly on that, on how you can do that. The next thing you can use ChatGPT for is keyword optimization. So ChatGPT is great to help you really identify all of those industry-specific keywords or role-specific words that you should make sure are in your job posting, because that is going to make your job posting more searchable to candidates. So platforms, for example, like Indeed, they use very similar algorithms to search engine optimization that's used by Google. In fact, speaking about Google, it is very common for a candidate to simply go to Google and type in HR coordinator, Winnipeg, Manitoba, or add in other keywords related to the role, like remote, or maybe it's recruitment focused. But whatever those words are that your candidates are using, you want to make sure that you're including them in the job posting so that they appear higher in those searches. Next is bias reduction. So ChatGPT can do a really great job of analyzing and removing any gendered or exclusionary terms that you have included in your posting, and it can suggest alternatives. It can scan the language you're using in your job posting that might deter people from applying. So research shows that women in particular are less likely to apply for a role unless they're like 100% match or very close. And so do you have things in your job posting that are not necessary or that might cause a well-qualified individual from not applying because you've set that standard far too high? So doesn't mean that whatever ChatGPT spits back, you have to necessarily implement, but it's very interesting to use it to do that lens review and see if there are some modifications you might want to consider. And then finally, you can use ChatGPT to do a bit of a competitive analysis. You could ask it to compare your job posting to your competitors, to other similar postings, and tell you, how you can make that posting more engaging, maybe where your strength is in your posting and where you maybe have some potential areas of opportunity to make it stand out more effectively. So these are some of the things it can help you do. And I wanted to share a couple of prompts that you might want to play with or test out. So if you want, go ahead and take a picture of the prompt on the screen. This one here, as you can see, what I'm asking ChatGPT to do is I'm asking it to use the internal job description pasted below to create an engaging external facing job posting. And then I'm asking it to ensure the following, and this is where you would insert all of your criteria. What is most important about this role, about your company, about your culture, vision, mission, all of those kinds of things that you think and want to ensure are shining through in that posting. So in this example, I've just said I wanted to optimize for relevant ATS and CEO keywords. I wanted to highlight what makes this role and our company unique. And I've put in there our values, growth opportunities, and role impact. And I wanted to compare the tone and language used by competitors for similar roles to ensure that it creates a posting that makes this one stand out. And then I always like to add, be sure to provide an explanation as to how you've met that criteria above. I want to understand its thinking and why it's making the suggestions it's making. So then I can use my gut and my experience and expertise to decide whether or not I'm aligned with that. And then I can use bits and pieces that are applicable. And then of course you'd go ahead and you would paste in your internal job description. And then that would spit out a great place to start, a job posting that you can then work from. So that's one prompt that you can test. This prompt is around that whole notion of bias reduction. So again, another one I just encourage you to test. So here we have, it's just, imagine it's just spit out your job posting. So now you're doing the next prompt and you're saying, I want you to now analyze the job posting that you've just created for potential bias. I want you to review it for gendered language, for age bias, for educational or experience-related barriers. I want you to make sure there's no disability exclusions or inclusions that you want to add. And I want you to look at the language that might deter a diverse candidate based on protected grounds. And then you can subsequently from there ask it to then recommend adjustments to make the posting more inclusive, accessible, and appealing to a broader and more diverse candidate pool. And again, I'm in no way suggesting that, you have to use everything that it suggests, but I think you'll find that it might point out some things you've just overlooked that could make it just more attractive to a very, diverse pool of candidates. So again, just encourage you to try that out. All right, the second application that I wanted to share with you is around resume analysis. So again, when I'm working with my clients, my role is to help them take what we've already created, which I refer to their strategic master resume, and make some subtle adjustments throughout it to make sure that it really is customized to your job posting. And so on the opposite side of that, you're going to get all of these resumes. And while your ATS, depending on its sophistication, will generally rank your resumes, and that is certainly a useful starting point for screening your candidates, you can use ChatGPT to do a deeper analysis to really fully understand the strengths, areas of opportunity, the experience, and the role fit of all of the individuals that you're considering. So you can do this in a number of ways. The first thing you can do is you can prompt it to really help you understand what each candidate brings to the table. So again, you've got a ton of expertise in this area. You can skim a resume really quickly, and you can pick out whether or not they've got some of the experience you need and some of those skills. But a tool like ChatGPT can really do a quick, easy job of bringing all of that to light for you to make sure that you're not missing anything potentially. It can also do a great job of comparing one candidate to the other. And so you can set it up that you can get it to literally, in a nice little chart, tell you, where the strengths are for each candidate, where their potential gaps are, and what qualifications are relevant to the job requirements. And that way you can literally see it on the screen with a side-by-side comparison on how they stack up. And then finally, you could use it as a way to summarize all of your notes. So if you're doing this work, maybe you're doing it as a pre-screen for a hiring manager, you want to be able to provide the manager with an overview of each candidate. You might even want to have the hiring manager focus in on some specific areas when they meet with the candidate. That takes time, right? That's a lot of manual work. Why not have ChatGPT do that summary for you? So here are some prompts that you might want to try. The first one is to analyze the resume pasted below. And by the way, if you're going to be doing that, again, I'm going to caution you to say two things. One, you need to be working within a closed source. And two, you want to make sure that you always avoid the personal information of the candidate. So again, never include their name, email address, phone number, that type of thing. And make sure you've opted out on the data being used. So again, going back to this prompt, you can have it analyze the resume pasted below and then compare it also to the job posting that you paste below. And then you can ask it to first identify the specific skills where the candidate matches the posting. Then you can have it highlight the gaps or potential gaps. And then you can get it to provide you that overall summary of their suitability. And also you can ask it to provide you with potential areas of concern that you want to flesh out in the interview. Now, again, I want to say that this is not intended to be a screen out tool. So I'm not suggesting that you do this and then you not interview a candidate. I'm saying that this is just going to give you perhaps more information around what they bring to the table and where there might be some gaps so that you can go into the interview really well prepared. Okay, so it's kind of like assessment tools that you might use in the interview process. You know, the rule of thumb is you don't rule people out based on their assessment. It's just additional information to help you make a good decision. And that's really the intent of this. Here's one more prompt. So this prompt will help you with that comparison. So I'm asking ChatGPT to compare candidate A to candidate B. I'm asking it to provide that side-by-side breakdown of their key skills and qualifications. I'm asking it to identify their gaps. And then I'm also asking it to identify anything that's unique about the individual that would help them stand out over all of the other candidates that have applied. All right. Just going to take a time check, just make sure. I know we're getting close to the end here, so I'm going to pick up the pace. This is the last strategy that I wanted to share, and it is regarding your interview prep. So again, we work with our clients to make sure that they are prepared for any of the potential questions that might come their way, and we base that on the job posting. So similarly, on the other side of the table, you've got this job posting, you've got your internal job description with all of those critical requirements. You can use ChatGPT to help you develop customized interview questions that are specific to the role and core competency requirements. What's great is that it can help you create general questions, behavior-based questions. It can even help generate questions for different levels. So it knows, or it will know if you tell it, you know, that you're dealing with a more senior individual, or maybe it's a more junior position, and that can help it adjust the level of the question. So lots of different ways you can use it. You can also have it analyze the resume and come up with questions that you should ask in the interview that's specific to the individual. So it can generate questions for clarification, maybe on those potential gaps that you've highlighted. It can kind of direct you on some of those background or achievement type questions that you might want to dig into. So it can really help you kind of have that well-rounded set of questions that are specific to the individual, but also very specific to the role. Now, going back to minimizing bias, ChatGPT can also help you create that rubric. So that is where you can actually have it take your interview questions and create a scoring guide that focuses on really objective criteria so that you're minimizing any type of hiring bias. And then finally, it can also summarize all of your notes. So when I'm doing a mock interview with a client and I'm furiously typing their answers into my questionnaire, and I'm making a million spelling mistakes and a lot of the notes barely make sense, I just run that whole thing through ChatGPT and I get it to clean up all my notes for me. So rather than having to painstakingly go back and do that, I have it do it. But then, of course, I read it over very carefully to make sure it hasn't lost any of the accuracy and that it hasn't hallucinated and created something that isn't there. And then you'd be able to take your interview notes and very easily forward them on to your hiring manager. So here are a couple of prompts with that regard. You can see here, you can ask it based on the job posting, paste it below, generate 5, 10, 15, whatever number you want, interview questions to help assess each candidate in the following areas. So you could list the core competencies of the role, you could list some of the responsibilities, and based on whatever your input is, it'll help create those questions. You could be specific and tell it what types of questions. So you could say, I want behavior-based, I want situational, whatever the case might be. And then you could also say, based on your previous assessment of candidate A and B, provide me with specific questions I should ask them with regards to their resume. Okay. The great thing is that you all know that you've got your chat is in your history. So over the course of multiple days, weeks, whatever the time frame is, you can always go back to your saved chat and you can just build from it. So you could start the chat with your internal job description and posting, and then a week later you could use it for analyzing resumes, and then the week after that you could use it for your interview questions. That way you don't have to start from scratch. And my final prompt to share with you today is around creating that interview scoring system. So again, you see there up on the screen, you determine what the criteria is. You feed that into the system, and then it will provide you a guide. Okay, so that wraps up what I wanted to share with you today. Certainly hope that you found some value. I wanted to also include my contact information. I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And should you have any questions on the services that we provide at People First, you can also reach out to me directly via email.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Misty. That was a very informative presentation. Just to remind everyone, you can use the chat function or the Q&A function. We do have some questions, but I had a quick question. In your opinion, for smaller HR teams, because I know some people are working with one or two teams, what do you think is the one or two most impactful ways of integrating AI into these smaller HR teams? Like, what would be the most impactful way? If we're not doing all the things you mentioned, what do you think the most impactful way would be?
Well, I mean, I think at a high level, it's looking for some of those repetitive tasks that you need to do them. They're part of the work that we do in HR, like job postings, but they take time and don't necessarily add a ton of value. So I say look for those opportunities where you can kind of use the tool to streamline those kind of manual time-consuming processes so that you really can free up the time in those higher value activities like building relationships and strategic project work, etc.
Okay. We do have a question here, which was, are you seeing companies putting resumes into ChatGPT for resume analysis, which you kind of talked about, but from your side of things, are you seeing companies doing that consistently?
Using ChatGPT to
For
analyze.
resume analysis.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know that a lot of organizations have applicant tracking systems. And with those applicant tracking systems, they're putting in questions to help rank candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that you're missing an opportunity if you're not. I think that depending on the sophistication of your system, you may choose not to do it. But I do think it's worth at minimum kind of playing with it, testing it out, and seeing whether it's adding any additional benefit or value compared to what your applicant tracking system is doing for you.
Okay. We have another question comment, which is with the use of Gen AI to create job descriptions, candidates are using Gen AI to write the resume and Gen AI to review those resumes. Are we feeling there's concern that Gen AI is just checking its own work? And are we losing touch with real people?
Yeah, I mean, this is the strongest message that we convey to our clients, so your potential employees. And that is that, again, we shouldn't be using this tool to create the document in its entirety. It really needs to remain authentic to the individual. We really focus in on making sure that, that you don't lose the voice within the document, that the individual is making sure that the language in their document is really how they naturally speak. What we don't want is a disconnect. We don't want you to read a resume and then have someone show up in the interview and you go, "Ooh, this doesn't seem like it's the same person." And I would say that's the same true of you creating documents on behalf of your company. It needs to read like your organization. So you really don't want to, in my opinion, you don't really want to ever leave it in its final state the way the AI tool has generated it. You want to make sure that you're making adjustments. I hope I answered that question. I hope I
I
got
think
that.
that's a great answer, right? And I think it's, it is one of those sort of, out in the universe questions like, are we losing touch with other people? And it's interesting because I think I see a lot on LinkedIn people posting about, and this was one of my questions, like, look at this resume and I can tell it's AI. And when people are looking at it, like, what are the glaring items you're seeing when you're reading a resume that makes you go, oof, like this is clearly AI, right?
Yeah.
And do we
Yeah.
skip over those resumes or do we look at them because they look great?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really interesting question. I mean, I think, first of all, I can tell when a client sends me a resume for review when they've clearly used ChatGPT, because there are telltale signs with just some of the words. Like if I see the word adept, the person is adept at something,
Yeah.
or the person catapulted results. Like I just know that these are not words that we naturally use in our everyday language.
Yes.
That to me is ding, ding, ding. You've definitely used ChatGPT. And so
Hmm.
I can appreciate on the other side of the table, when you're reviewing those resumes, you're now questioning, is this really, am I really going to be meeting this individual, or is this just really a facade that
Hmm.
just sounds good? So, again, I think that individuals using these tools just have to make sure that they're reviewing it for accuracy, they're reviewing it for, authenticity, and they have to be aware. We warn our clients, you're
Yeah.
using ChatGPT. Guess what? Recruiting professionals, HR professionals, they're using the tool too. They will know.
Hmm.
So yes, use it to help with improvements, but I recommend you create it yourself and then you use it for refinement as opposed to using it from scratch.
Okay. Are you seeing AI in the recruitment process being used a lot in terms of where advertisements for jobs are being posted? Are they using AI in those integrations, whether it be through Indeed or through, LinkedIn or Facebook postings or that kind of stuff? Are you seeing a trend towards using AI to develop those types of audiences for the different types of postings?
Yeah, I mean, I think that just like the client is trying to gain a competitive advantage over their
Hmm.
competition, that, HR professionals and organizations are trying to gain, an advantage over their competition in attracting the best talent.
Ah.
And so even if you're just using it for a checkpoint, right?
Mhm.
Like we talked about, potentially minimizing bias through some of the requirements that you're including, through some of the language that you're using. I think it's just really important that you do a review to make sure that you're really presenting that opportunity and your organization in the very best light, and that you're
Mhm.
able to attract a really diverse top talent pool. And
Mhm.
so I think even if you don't end up making a lot of changes, just using it, like I said, as a gut check to make sure that you've done a great job, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think my last question, and if anybody has any more questions, again, you can use the Q&A or chat function, is what's the one thing AI should never replace in HR? Like absolutely never replace in HR. What it cannot be or should not be replaced in HR. I should say cannot.
Ultimately comes down to anything that is that should reside as a human decision-making decision. So, when I think about, you should never use it to make your final hiring decision.
Mm,
You can use it to inform your decision, but you shouldn't use it for that purpose. I would never use it as a way to, for employee relations or termination decisions or
yeah.
performance evaluation decisions.
Yeah.
Anything that requires your expertise, your human context and
Mhm.
oversight, it has to remain intact. These
Okay.
tools don't have that element. You do. And that's what
Mhm.
makes you the professional. And so you have to make sure you're really careful in that regard.
Okay. I don't see any more questions. So Carrie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. So thank you so much for attending today's webinar. I think everyone get very like the overview of how HR can use the AI, ChatGPT, and these kind of function for your recruitment and the job posting template and these kind of stuff. Thank you so much again for Misty for her time and expertise. So we will have the recording available on our website in the next few days. And I have just posted the part 2 of our webinar series. It will take place on March 4th. The topic is AI in governance. We'll talk more about the HR policy, best practice, and the IP rights explained. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Misty. And thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you. Have a
Thanks.
great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.